Well, thank you so much, Erica, and thank you all for joining. It's been an incredible 5 years hosting and producing the show, and I couldn't have done it without all of our loyal listeners. So before we get started, I did just want to take a minute and say thank you all to the listeners and to the folks that could join us today for this conversation. We really do appreciate all of your loyalty, and here's to 5 more years of this program. I also couldn't have done this show and our space coverage without our two guests that we have here this evening. You've heard both of these guests either on the show or through our space reporting here on WMFE, America's Space Station. First, I'm very excited to have Nicole Stott. She's an engineer, retired astronaut, and artist. She joined the astronaut corps in 2000 and flew on 2 space shuttle missions to the ISS, spending more than 100 days in orbit. She's the 10th woman to conduct a spacewalk. And as an artist, Stott combines her artwork and spaceflight experience to inspire creative thinking about solutions to our planetary challenges. And with that, she is the founder of the Space for Art Foundation. Nicole, thank you so much for joining us this evening. And we also have Charlie Bolden, a former NASA administrator, retired Marine Corps general, and astronaut. Those are the only the 3 things that I could fit into your intro there, Charlie. You've done a lot more. You were nominated by President Barack Obama to serve as NASA administrator from 2009 to 2017. And during Charlie's time as NASA administrator, he led the agency during the retirement of the Space Shuttle program and developed NASA's commercial crew and cargo programs. And you've also spent some time in space, 28 days, if I've done my math correctly. Charlie and Nicole, thank you both so much for coming. And don't forget to unmute so that we can have a good conversation here. So in preparation of this conversation, I dug into our archives in 2016. That's when the show launched, to see what was going on in space. And just to bring us all back in time, since I know time is kind of a weird thing these days, here's a few of the major stories that we were working on in 2016. NASA's Juno mission arrived at Jupiter. Scott Kelly returned from his year in space. ESA's ExoMars orbiter arrived at Mars. OSIRIS-REx launched from Cape Canaveral on a mission to snag some asteroid dust. And SpaceX found its groove landing its rocket boosters. So I want to ask you both, what has stood out to you over the past 5 years as a defining moment in space? And I'll start with you, Nicole.
Wow, that's a really difficult question, I think, to answer, because there has been this really wonderful mix of human spaceflight activities, the continuous presence, certainly in this past year, our 20th anniversary of, continuous human presence on the International Space Station as an international community. I think that's ginormous, and getting people, our crew members and international partner crew, back to space from U.S. soil here. I know I'm not answering with just one. And then I don't know, with these like planetary missions and stuff, I am always in awe of how we can go out, explore through these missions and kind of have them be our eyes back to who and where we are in space. That relationship we have to these places that we're learning more about and always wanting to know more about ourselves through it. But I guess I don't have a single thing I can answer with.
I didn't expect you to have a single thing.
I know, you know me as the rambler, and there's so much going on. I think that's what's so exciting about it, is that if you just look in these past 5 years, how much really exciting work is still going on.
Mm-hmm. Charlie, what sticks out to you over the past 5 years of space exploration?
A lot of stuff, as Nicole said. It goes without saying that the launch of Doug Hurley and Bob Behnken on the Crew Dragon was phenomenal, because that marked the return of human spaceflight from the Space Coast, the place that we've all grown accustomed to it, and we know it should go from. But if I were to pick a single thing, it would be something that happened very recently. And it was the Mars convoy, Tianwen-1, which was the Chinese Mars orbiter lander rover. The lander and rover haven't performed yet, but the orbiter is there successfully, followed by the Emirates Mars mission, the Hope probe, which is performed exceptionally well, and then Perseverance. So I would say that bodes well for the future, because I think all 3 agencies have agreed to collaborate on data exchanges and the like. And as long as we can do that, there's hope for humanity. If we can continue to work together that way, just the fact that the UAE, a country that didn't even have a space program before 2014, becomes only the second nation in the world to reach Mars on its first attempt. That speaks loads to the brilliance of the human species, and the fact that diverse ideas, diversity, if you will, is critical to our advancement in the universe.
And that HOPE orbiter is already sharing scientific data with the community. Already we're seeing some really, really cool things coming back from HOPE. We did have a poll before the show started here, and a majority of our listeners and our viewers here today saw the return to human space flight as one of the defining moments of the half decade since the show's been on the air. But also there was some exoplanets in there too, which I think is really cool in those planetary missions. But I do want to go back to Commercial Crew, Charlie, because I do think that was one of the defining moments here for us. And you and I spoke about this before the launch of Bob and Doug for our special show we did, Return to Flight. And you were kind of leading the charge to get NASA to leverage these commercial partnerships and utilize what we've learned from commercial cargo to Commercial Crew. Take us back, Charlie. What was it like, pardon the pun, getting Commercial Crew off the ground?
It was grueling, and I want to correct the record. When I became the NASA administrator in 2009, I was the healthy skeptic. I was not a commercial ideologue as many others were. I was considered by some in the Obama administration as being the rogue administrator, because I didn't just fall right into line and say, okay, we're going to shut down the shuttle and we're going to give all the money to the commercial entities and we'll be flying next year, because I knew that, as all of us do, that space flight is very difficult. We've seen that. We trusted that SpaceX had something that we thought would work. If you remember, when NASA gave them the first $500 million contract, I'm not sure they had a successful launch yet, to be quite honest. Falcon 9 hadn't flown for sure. And they were not having success with the Falcon 1. So it was faith in Gwynne Shotwell and Elon that they and their workforce could deliver. But none of us fooled ourselves that they were going to be able to deliver in 2 or 3 years. So it was grueling first of all, getting Congress to finally approve full funding for Commercial Crew took us 4 years longer than we had anticipated. We hoped to get it in 2011 so that we could be flying in 2013 or 2014. We didn't get full funding until 2015. And so that should help people understand why it took so long. SpaceX did their best, but they couldn't work without money. And so they weren't able to start in earnest until 2015. And so I thought, launching humans this year was awesome.
We do want you all to join the conversation too, so please use the Q&A function in your Zoom window there, and we'll get your questions to Nicole and Charlie as they come in. Charlie, I want to go back to Commercial Crew because, it was more than just a cost-saving program, right? Commercial Crew will be a lot cheaper than paying Russians for rides to the station, but it was much more than that, right? Tell me the importance of this, from an image standpoint, when it comes to launching human astronauts from the U.S.
The image part doesn't really bother me. The part that I thought was critical for getting Commercial Crew up and running was that it meant that NASA was now free to spend the $2 billion a year that we were having to spend on shuttle, whether we flew one flight or 10. It was just the infrastructure cost for maintaining shuttle and paying a modicum of that amount to get commercial vehicles that were perfectly capable of transporting humans into space and allowing NASA to invest that other money for deep space exploration with humans, which is where we're headed right now. I think that's the critical accomplishment of Commercial Crew. The pride that comes with launching people from here it goes without saying, but still the practical freeing NASA up to be able to invest in deep space exploration with humans something that we weren't capable to do as long as we were flying shuttle.
Mm-hmm. Nicole, I saw you out there for the last crew launch, Crew 1,
Right.
as a former astronaut.
Yeah.
As a former astronaut and one of the last to fly on one of the shuttle missions, I've got to ask you, what was it like seeing that pad light up once again, knowing that some of your colleagues were atop that rocket?
Well, I mean, really, really exciting. And, I think just as we did with Bob and Doug launching, just to live vicariously, I think a little bit through, from the astronaut side of what they were about to go off and do, and know that it was going to be this, I don't know, just this opportunity to open up that pathway again for getting not only our U.S. crew members, but as we've already seen on Crew 1, having JAXA and for next time, JAXA and ESA astronauts traveling with us with the goal of having all of our partners participate in some way in U.S. launches again. We're continuing in parallel with flying crew members on the Soyuz too. I just look at this like, this partnership that's in place is really incredible. But to watch that happen and to see them going out, to just see the differences in the launch pad. I've had that question a lot, like, oh, aren't you sad that it doesn't look like it did when when it was there with shuttle? Well, shuttle, it didn't look like it did when we, launched Apollo. In order for us to continue to be able to, extend our capabilities, we have to modify things sometimes. And so it was really, really cool to see that stuff coming to life. And, as Charlie mentioned, going into all this, I'm in awe of how this whole public-private partnership is working as well. Really facilitating. I got big lightning here. Facilitating the the ability, the capability of these companies to be able to do these things by the funding and the engineering and expertise support through NASA as well. That's, I think, allowed them to ramp up a lot more quickly than they would without that. And, so that's exciting to me too, to see, when we look forward to the day where, we're watching these flights like we would, going to the gate at the, at the airport to take, to travel, and just knowing that it's just part of what we do. I think that's, where we're off to now.
Now, Nicole, I know that a lot of the folks that are launching now were, in your astronaut class. We talked about Doug and Bob. I tried to combine their names there. And Charlie, these are a lot of your employees at one point. I mean, do you guys get envious watching them get to climb into those Crew Dragon capsules and launch again?
Let's be honest. Yes.
Absolutely. My gosh, when Doug and Bob were going, it's hysterical. It's like, I just, all I can think about is that picture of us, Charlie, the kind of the classic, you go and do your class picture when you're first selected. You don't really know each other all that well, and I look at kind of the goofy one that we did now, where we're all just kind of goofing around, and, you see the personality of all these people in that picture. And then you've got that kind of personal connection to them too. And yes, you want them to pack them in, you in their bag to take you with them. And yeah, Bob and Doug were in my class. Their wives, Karen and Megan, were in my class as well. And Megan's getting ready to go on the next, Crew Dragon. I mean, how cool is that?
We've got SpaceX launching humans, as we're talking about. Boeing is very close behind to launching as well. There's also NASA's call for a human lander for the Artemis program, which is its next moonshot, that has 3 groups of private companies competing. Charlie, did you ever expect the commercial partnerships to expand like this? That commercial partners will be landing humans on the moon, hopefully in the 2020s?
I'll be honest. I did not expect it to happen this quickly. Now, that for some people, you may say, what do you mean quickly? I thought we would spend quite some time getting to the point where we were all comfortable with just launching humans to and from the International Space Station. Although, to be quite honest, I am still hopeful that we'll see the same vim and vigor to produce platforms, destinations in low Earth orbit run by commercial entities. Otherwise, we're going to be in trouble because we need, for the launch providers to be successful, they need places to go. And so we need more companies like Axiom and Nanoracks and Bigelow and some of the others who are building these habitats or low Earth orbiting platforms for things to happen on. We need for that to happen with the same enthusiasm that we're doing lunar landers and the like. You know, the moon is just a destination, and but we need more destinations in low Earth orbit to help facilitate the success of at least America's launch providers.
Right before we got on this program, NASA fired the 4 main engines of the Space Launch System rocket out at Stennis. Were you guys watching that?
I didn't get to see it in person, but I looked at the rerun, and I know you had a question that said, what did Nicole and I see that the common person didn't see? I can't speak for Nicole, but I'll say for me, nothing. You know, it was fire and smoke, which is and noise, and that's what a green run's supposed to be. You know, and you wouldn't see anything from a successful green run, and you can't really say that it was successful just by looking. The engineers are combing through the data right now, and sometime tomorrow, maybe, Boeing and NASA and Rocketdyne and all the other vendors hopefully will be very, very happy with all the data that they see. But it's, you know, this stuff is hard.
And
but I
those
did
are
hear
the
they could see it from space. Are there pictures?
Oh, really?
I think I heard something.
Yeah.
I haven't looked to see yet, but they, the report was that they could see it from space, from station. So let's see. Cool.
I mean, those were the engines that you all rode into space, right? Those RS-25s. Like, tell me what it's like to have 3 of those behind you. I can't imagine having 4 of them underneath you. What's it like?
You want to talk about it? You got a more recent experience.
Well, I'll tell you, you know, I thought those engines, that I thought it was just going to be a lot more dynamic when those engines lit. But it was kind of this smooth rumble from them, you know. It was the interesting thing apart, and you know, when the shuttle, it was like that 10, 9, 8, 7, 6 seconds was when the main engines lit on the orbiter, and you know, they were at an angle, so the whole vehicle kind of, you know, tips a little bit, and you're at the very top, so you kind of, you know, feel that motion, that twang. What was that, Charlie? The NASA technical term for that whole motion of the stack was the twang. And what was so cool to me was, because you know from an engineering standpoint that this is supposed to happen, but then when it does, it's like it's a miracle that, you know, this whole thing rocks and then it comes back, and like perfectly timed when it's vertical is when those solid rocket boosters light. And that's when you're like, holy moly, was I ever on a launch pad? Just know I'm going someplace really fast. And that's, you know, it really starts shaking around. But those engines, they were pretty smooth, kind of just low rumble sound. Yeah.
Will be very exciting to see when SLS does launch on Artemis 1. Charlie, as you know, presidential administrations steer NASA's direction. The Trump administration put NASA on this path to return to the moon, and it seems like the Biden administration will continue that path. Where do you see NASA going in the next 4 years under a Biden administration?
Let me, and I'm sensitive to this. I want to correct the record. The Trump administration did something that surprised me. They kept us on the path to going back to the moon. You know, from the Bush administration, both Bushes, I think, actually started us on this trajectory to the moon and Mars. And we've kind of bobbed and weaved, but we're on a trajectory that we've been on for several administrations. It's just that when you went from Obama to Trump and now to Biden, it's probably the straightest course I've seen personally in my memory of the space program, because we've not made any dramatic changes in any of the programs. The change that the Trump administration made was to timing, and you know, for trying to get it in the course of the first term of the administration, they challenged NASA to do it by 2024. I'm not sure that there was anyone who believed that 2024 was a realistic launch date for Artemis. We'll get there, but we had always planned that it would be sometime in the latter half of the 2020s with targeting Mars for the latter half of the 2030s. So I'm a happy camper.
Mm-hmm. There are reports out today from The Verge and the Washington Post that Biden will name former Senator Bill Nelson as the next NASA administrator. Charlie, I'm wondering what you would think of that pick to lead the agency.
Well, he's my crewmate, so I think Senator Nelson would not be angry if I said this. My choice, my preference, my hope was that we would have a woman. I would have loved to have a black woman, but there was no black woman in the queue. But I'm happy with Senator Nelson, provided he has a female deputy, because the deputy, much the same as happens sometimes when the administrator comes from outside the technical community, the deputy becomes the technical power. If you look at Hans Mark, if you look at some of the other deputies, people think that James Webb, who is one of the foremost administrators, he sent us to the moon. James Webb was an attorney and a Marine fighter pilot, by the way. But still, he was an attorney, but he was very well steeped in the politics of Washington, had been in the State Department, in the Defense Department. So the advantage that I think Bill Nelson will bring, hopefully, is knowing people in the Congress, having a great amount of respect for the process, and much the same as Jim Bridenstine did, finding ways to coax, cajole, and get Congress to continue to support the program and live with the mantra of NASA, which is constancy of purpose, so that we keep moving down the tracks to putting humans back on the moon in this decade, and then without leaving there, continuing to move some more humans onto Mars.
And we'll get to hear his famous "No bucks, Rogers" quote a lot more, right? Nicole, Charlie mentioned this about having some sort of consistency over administrations. How much of this affects the astronaut corps? Do you pay attention to the politics of NASA and what's happening in DC when you're on the ground preparing for missions? What's it like being involved in this, political agency as an astronaut?
Well, I think there's some level of attention paid to it for sure. I mean, certainly the focus is on, the mission that you might be assigned to at the time, the mission that you might be supporting, because, I always like to say, 99.9% of an astronaut's job is not flying in space. It's here on Earth, having these roles that overlap, training yourself, supporting your classmates, your crewmates that are on station or preparing to go, developing procedures, all of that kind of stuff, as well as supporting the projects that are in development for future vehicles, future missions. And that's where I think if within the astronaut office, if you're going to get involved with anything that has to do with the politics or the longer term kinds of shifts that might be going on, is part of those program development activities. But quite honestly, I think, there's a little bit of a, internal focus to, okay, the missions we're flying now, making sure that they're as safe and successful as possible, and, kind of looking through our ground jobs at what's happening, from a longer term standpoint.
I want to switch topics here and talk a little bit about inclusivity and diversity. Charlie, you mentioned a bit about this before. In the past 5 years, we've seen some firsts in space. We've seen the first all-female spacewalk and the first Black astronaut to spend a 6-month stay on the International Space Station. Nicole, we've talked about this before, but how would you rate NASA's efforts to be more gender inclusive when it comes to its female astronauts?
Yeah, I am. I give NASA a wholehearted thumbs up with this stuff, because it's not that there's not room for improvement. I will say that that's always, no matter where you look, that it always is. But I have been really just so pleasantly, I guess, happily aware of the kinds of diversity movements that have happened within NASA over the years. I mean, we just celebrated, the 50th anniversary of a lot of Apollo missions. There's certainly been films that are making us more aware of the kind of diversity that existed that we didn't even know existed, which I think is really wonderful. But when you look, you just like visibly look at, say, mission control in the Launch Control Center. For Apollo, you had to go and search for a woman. I mean, Launch Control Center, there was one woman, Joanne Morgan, sitting, smack dab in the middle of the control center. And I think in Houston at Mission Control, there was one woman, not in the front room, but in the back room, Poppy Northcutt, in the back room. But now you look at Mission Control or the Launch Control Center, and it's just this mix of humanity. You're not having to say, where's Joanne? And both of those operations are run by really extraordinary women. And across NASA as a whole, and I can only speak for human spaceflight, but I've just seen this blend of humanity that's just so cool to me to see happening when, in fact, at universities, we still struggle. In the universities, in engineering colleges, we struggle to get 25%, female enrollment. And yet in the NASA astronaut office right now, roughly 40% of that current NASA astronaut are women. I mean, that's huge. That's huge. So,
Charlie, why is it so important that, the crews on these low Earth orbit missions reflect what we look like down here on Earth?
I think the critical importance is because they bring diversity of thought and diversity of ideas, which is really important. Nicole spent time on station. I didn't, but station is like working down here a lot more than shuttle. Shuttle was every 15 minutes, there was another thing on your doggone flight plan that had to be accomplished. So there was no flexibility for the crew, no room for imagination. The station crews are left to their own designs to a great extent. When Charlie Blackwell talks to her crews about, here's what we want to do tomorrow. Here are the things we want to get accomplished. Well, when you've got people who came from different backgrounds, different cultures, to be quite honest, you come up with some phenomenal ideas. I remember flying with Sergei Krikalev on my last flight. We spent days waiting for Houston not Houston, but waiting for the flight controllers to give us a fix for a crimped airline that we had going into the Space Hab module. And Sergei, because, in Russia, they don't have the communications capability that we do even today. We have constant comm, except for maybe 5 or 10 minutes in orbit. And Sergei said, why don't we just fix it? I said, well, Sergei, we can't just fix it because, mission control has to evaluate everything and all this. And he said, well, if I want Mir, I'd go get the Atlas cover and we roll it up and we'd stick it in the hose and we'd fix our And so about 3 or 4 days later, Sergei and Franklin were cruising through the tunnel and going back to the Space Hab module with our Super 8, giving a tour of everybody in Russian and Spanish. And they showed mission control the crimp. And it was like, oh, we've got to fix that. We've got to fix that. And they sent us up a fix that probably wouldn't have worked, to be quite honest, because they talked about getting a little piece of rubber tubing that we thought would collapse and really cut off all the airflow. And so we had a 5-minute loss of comm coming up. And Sergei looked at me. I said, yeah, I know. And so we went and got the Atlas cover and curled it up, took the line off, stuck it in, it popped out, and we had everything fixed. And when we came back, we showed the ground and they said, stand by. And they came back and said, yeah, that looks good to us. So, but that was a different way of doing business. And had we listened to Sergei on day one, which was, the first day of our flight, it would have been a non-factor. We'd have been done. Long answer, the diversity of thought is what's really important.
Right. I want to take a question from Christopher. He writes, this is to Nicole. What would be your advice for little girls that would like to be an astronaut? His daughter, Sarah, who's 4 years old, is watching right now. She is so excited. So, Nicole, what do you have to say to Sarah, who wants to follow in your footsteps?
Wow, I would say stay excited like she is, figure out these things that really where you really are genuinely curious, because that's the stuff that will stay with you and will inspire you to want to learn more about them. I mean, when I think about my own path, it was really wanting to know how things fly and discovering, okay, this is what I have to study at school if I want to know how things fly. And then it was, wow, if you want to know how airplanes fly, why wouldn't you want to know how rocket ships fly? And those kinds of things that they open up these really cool opportunities for you, but you're loving it every step of the way because it's what you were curious about already. And I'll tell you, the fact that your dad has you on this this webinar tonight is really encouraging to me, because I think back and I credit, I would say again, I'll use that statistic, 99.9% of where my inspiration came from parents who just shared what they loved with me so that I could figure out, are those the same kinds of things I love, or do I like something different? And so, keep encouraging your dad to do that for you too.
Mm-hmm. I want to open this next question up to both of you. This is from Danielle Pryor, who works in the newsroom here with me. This one's directed to Nicole, but I think, Charlie, you might be able to weigh in on this. Her sister is an engineer and has faced a lot of barriers in the field as a woman. What advice would you give to her to support her and other women like her who are in STEM? I'll turn that to you, Nicole. But Charlie, I'd like your input on that as well, especially for underrepresented folks in engineering leadership and other fields where there might not be a lot of underrepresented people in the field. So, Nicole, I'll let you take the question first.
I think the first thing would be to really kind of, find that confidence in yourself. Think back about why, what kind of drove you to wanting to do this, that curiousness, that interest in what you're doing. That for me was the most difficult thing, was to believe enough in myself that I could, take that next step, that I could do something like pick up the pen and fill out the application to, even think about being an astronaut. And then to always be, always have your eyes, your heart, your mind open to the people around you that are lifting you up. I mean, you can find them, you can, stay aware of them, and they are the ones that will continue to do that for you. I think regardless of where you're working, whether it's STEM or not kind of STEM thing, but that's, I think that's a really significant thing. Because I can say, even though I started to think, more confidently about, and I'll use astronaut as an example of considering this job as astronaut, I would not have picked up the pen. The one thing that I had total control of, I would not have done it without the encouragement of those people that were in my life. And, they didn't say to me, I think I've said this to you before, Brendan, they didn't say to me, oh, Nicole, you'll make the greatest astronaut there ever was. You've got to do this. But they didn't discourage me. And they did, reinforce this one thing I needed to do. And I needed to hear that from them in order to have that strength myself. And I will just end with, the rocket ship doesn't care if you're a boy or girl. So keep that in mind all the time. And sadly, it doesn't matter where you go. There's always going to be the people that are, not your supporters, but you just got to kind of look to the ones that are.
Charlie, what advice would you give to folks who are, trying to break into a leadership position that is dominated by, white males? How do you navigate that?
Brendan, I'll kind of add to what Nicole said. What I always tell women and underrepresented minorities is, first of all, do not waste your time trying to convince somebody that they should like you or accept you. That's hopeless. So, you got too much stuff to do. Mm-hmm. Perform. Follow your passion and do your job, just as Nicole said. The other thing that I would say would be, and Nicole talked about this at the very end, empathize with people around you who are going through the same thing that you went through, and reach back and pull them along, or find somebody who just doesn't actually have the confidence that you've developed so far, and help them to develop that. I would have never, ever thought about being an astronaut had I not met the late, great Dr. Ron McNair. Ron became my role model and my idol and my mentor. I was a test pilot, something else I never dreamed of doing until I became a test pilot. But I met Ron. He was in the first group of astronauts selected in shuttle astronauts in 1978. And he came back with some of the others in his class for a reunion at the test pilot school in Patuxent River, Maryland. And I met him, and he was phenomenal. I mean, a young black man just like me from South Carolina, just like me. The only difference was all his life he had dreamed of being an astronaut, and he believed in himself and applied and was selected the first time around. Before he went back to Houston, he said, "Hey, are you going to apply for the program?" I said, "Not on your life." And I was serious. He said, "What?" He said, "Why not?" I said, "Ron, they'd never pick me." And he looked at me sternly and he said, "That is the dumbest thing I ever heard. How do you know if you don't ask?" And I was embarrassed more than anything else because, like Nicole, my mom and dad were teachers who encouraged me all the time and told me I could do anything I wanted to do. And I had forgotten that. And Ron just hit me right in the head and reminded me. And so I applied and got an opportunity to interview. Did not expect to get selected, but I went to Houston and I had a good time that week. There were others who probably should have been selected, may have been more qualified than I, but they worried about it and they got their blood pressure up and, or they got blood in their urine or something else. I had a good time. I played softball and I drank beer with everybody else and I answered questions when asked, but I spent time in the astronaut office and went back home and told my wife, "No, we don't have a snowball's chance in hell of going there. So let's just get on with the rest of our lives." And I was shocked to find that I had been selected. But it was just not wasting my time trying to convince somebody that I should be there. I just think that's a waste of time.
And I think these are important conversations to have. And both of you have been candid with me in the past when we do talk about that. So for that, I do appreciate that. And I hope our listeners get something from hearing your stories. I want to switch gears a little bit. We talked about NASA and SpaceX successfully launching 2 crews from Florida over the past few months. They did it during a global pandemic, which is no easy feat. Nicole, I want to start with you first. What was astronaut isolation and quarantine like before a mission when you were flying? And what is it like now for Bob and Doug and for the Crew 1 astronauts? What did they have to go through and what made it different for them?
Well, if I remember correctly, I think for us it
wasn't that long ago, was it?
I know. Well, it was like 10 years ago. How could that be? But so for us, I think it was, you started in quarantine in Houston for a few days. I don't think it was a full week. It was like a few days. And then you went down you all flew as a crew down to Florida at Kennedy Space Center and stayed in the crew quarters there for 10 days, 7 to 10 days. I swear, I really, it's like, it's a blur. And then, but the problem is you get down there, I don't know, I'm assuming this happened to you somewhere along the way, Charlie, over your multiple missions, is that you get down there, launch is set for a certain day, and you go out to the pad and you strap in and you come back to crew quarters. And then 3 days later, you're trying, so there's this push of staying and it extending on its own for mission delays and stuff. But I think it was like roughly a 10-day time frame for quarantine. And, it was very limited, the people you could see. You did have some access to, I could see my husband, at a couple planned times during that quarantine in Florida. My son, and I still don't like this rule. My son, both times, he was 7 on my first flight and 9 on my second flight. And apparently kids get a lot less germy at 12 or 14. I can't remember what the age is. So I was not able to have any contact with him for that, that time frame. So that to me was, I didn't like, you could see it on my face. I didn't like that rule, but I understand the rule. And, but now I think the difference is it's an extended time frame. I think it's, almost 3 weeks, isn't it?
2 or 3 weeks.
Yeah. And the people you're already having contact with before you go into quarantine is significantly reduced because they've cut back, on the number of people you'll see during your training sessions and when you're traveling. And certainly the number of people within that you get to have any exposure to in crew quarters has been really cut back. So what I liked though, and Charlie, I really wanted to get your sense of this too, is this one new tradition they seem to have as part of launch day, where the families are right there. Like right there, I get goosebumps thinking about it. They're right there out of, the ONC building, rating there where you're getting into the crew transport vehicle to go out to the launch pad, and you're not touching them. You can't touch them, but you're there with them is very different. And I think a whole lot better than, than what we had with shuttle launches and stuff. So I was really pleased to see that happening.
Yeah. Charlie, what do you make of that?
I agree. I think that's phenomenal. And again, when you talk about diversity of ideas, the Russians have always done that. When you launch, the family is there. They see you launch morning, and they're a lot more loose than we would want to be. But that's critically important, for your kid to be able to see you and see that you're okay, and that he or she is okay. I think that's a big deal. The thing that you and Nicole and I talked about the other day was it points out the critical importance of the vaccine program, vaccinations, making sure that everybody get vaccinated whenever you have an opportunity, because it's really critically important, not just for our nation, but for the world. The virus, it doesn't play. And so if you don't get everybody free of it, then it's always going to be somewhere where it's coming back and it's developing. And we know that every time a new strain comes up, there's a chance the vaccines that you have had may not work. So it's critically important that we encourage people to take their vaccinations, wear their masks, distance, do whatever it is, because as long as we're really disciplined about that, we're going to come out of this a lot quicker than we might have otherwise. And critically important is we do not want to get a virus on the International Space Station. You can't. We don't have a way to take a mister and go up there and do the kind of stuff you do in an airplane. That 250 miles away from the planet, with no way to get all that kind of stuff there. We've got to keep it as clean as we can. We find bacteria every once in a while, but we can clean those up. A virus like this one, we don't want to do. So it's really important.
Charlie, as a former administrator, I'm sure you thought about risk and things that could go wrong. When you were running the show at NASA, did global pandemic, was that ever a scenario that possibly could have happened?
No, well, then let me stop. Let me go back and say something like we're experiencing now. I never thought of, but we were right in the middle of Ebola.
Oh yeah, that's right.
We had SARS, I forget which number it was, and that occurred, but the Obama administration jumped right on it, and so we didn't have a problem. Ebola really scared us because we have people who travel, and with shuttle, we had people who traveled all over the world. We had emergency landing sites in Africa, in Europe, and everywhere, and so we didn't look at it from the pandemic standpoint like we do today, where it's wiping people out, but we were quite aware of it, and we had to plan for ways to keep our crews safe, because we actually sent astronauts to those forward landing sites so they would be there to help if a shuttle had to divert into a place like that.
I want to switch gears finally and talk about something that I'm really excited about. In the very near future, space tourism. There's companies like Blue Origin and Virgin Galactic are on the verge of launching space tourists. And SpaceX is already setting up some civilian missions, both to low Earth orbit and to the International Space Station. Nicole, what do you make of this new future of possibly people like me getting to go to space? And we have a little poll there if you want to weigh in if you would be a space tourist. But Nicole, what do you make of this new future?
I'm excited about it too. I think there's, this whole evolution of how we see sci-fi becoming sci-fact. It's so exciting. And Brendan, I don't know about you, but no, I'm just joking. Wouldn't that be awesome? The three of us, let's go. And Christine,
let's do it.
Ryan, we got a crew of 5 right here.
Is Elon watching? Can he send us up?
Yeah. I'm so excited about it because I think that, first of all, there's, just kind of the awe and wonder side of it. That experience of, with your eyes, with your heart, with your mind, just seeing, feeling, experiencing our home planet in a totally new way, new perspective that I think any of us as astronauts want anyone who wants to see that, to experience it. But just you look at the way the technology will evolve, as we send more and more people, the same kinds of things that we're having to do to accelerate the tech to get us, back to the moon, onto Mars, we're going to have to be thinking about those same kinds of things as we look at sending, people who are going for a kind of vacation or, touristy way. But I think that there's kind of the middle ground too of scientists and other explorers that are doing it in a way that's, that's kind of job related as well. It's not just I'm just going to go there for 2 days and hang out in space and come home, but there's, other rationale for it, other economics of it, and, bringing. One of the things I love about it too is I think it's going to encourage, just like us going back to the moon, it's going to encourage us to start thinking about what can we lift up off the planet that helps life continue to improve on Earth, which is why I love the space station motto, off the Earth, for the Earth, because everything we're doing there is ultimately with that goal. But when we can start thinking in a much bigger way about generating all of our electricity from space through space-based solar power, or elements that we can utilize on the moon, using the moon to get to Mars, all of that's, pulling some of the stuff that's not so good for us off the planet into space in a place that's benign for it, is really, really exciting to me. And I think it comes through those pathways of opening up the access to space to a lot more people.
Charlie, is space tourism a good thing? Michael Seeley asks, are programs like Inspiration 4, which is the all-civilian SpaceX mission to low Earth orbit, is that a good thing? Is it a useful step in kind of raising some capital for a private company to lower the cost of access for other folks and other agencies? What's your outlook on the space tourism industry?
I'm a big fan of particularly Inspiration 4, because of its mission, actually, to provide funds for research in preventing children's cancer. I will caution people when we talk about space tourism, and I'd appreciate Nicole's comment on this. Space is harsh and hard. And I think space tourism is for people to do for a day or two, where they can really gain a phenomenal appreciation of the planet. What I don't want to see happen is we put people up there and they stay for a week or two, hate it after a while because it isn't like being here on Earth, and they come back with a bad taste in their mouth. I'd rather see tourism be days at a time, and leave the long duration missions to people who are doing research, exploration, and making sure that things are safe before we go that far. If I think back on my high school and even elementary school days of studying the old pioneers, I don't know anybody who got into a covered wagon because they wanted to go tour west of the Mississippi. They had a purpose in mind, and they were looking for a place for better life, and the like. And so I think we should treat space the same way.
This question is from Lily, who's one of our interns this semester, and she asked, with space tourism, isn't there some kind of preparation process or some selection process? NASA astronauts have to go through a rigorous physical selection process to make sure that they can deal with the harshness of space travel, as Charlie mentioned, and also kind of some mental evaluation. I mean, Nicole, do you think regular people can just go to space? Can they send me without doing a psych eval?
I don't know about that. No, I think, as far as I know, with all of these programs that are in place right now, whether it's Virgin Galactic with suborbital, or it's, Blue that's looking at doing orbital, or what we have to look forward to with the SpaceX missions, and either going to station or to low Earth orbit, I think there is a screening process in place, whether that's the medical, physical, psychological, that just is going to happen. When you look at what we've done, I was on station when Guy Laliberté came to station. He was, I can't remember, the 8th of the what we called spaceflight participants that flew on Soyuz. And I think he was there about 10 days. And I really enjoyed the time there with him, but he, through that program with Roscosmos and the folks over in Star City, they put them through some pretty rigorous screening, including learning to speak Russian and, the physical side of the training and the psychological side of the training. And, not all of those folks that applied to do that ended up flying either. So I think there's always going to have to be some rigor in it. I don't think you can just sign the form. I don't, it's a little bit different than just going bungee jumping, right? You're not just going to be able to sign the form that says, whatever that word is, I indemnify. I don't know what I sign away everything. I just don't think that we can do that anytime soon.
With private tourism coming online, I had the chance to interview Haley Arsenault, who is going to be on that Inspiration 4 mission. And I asked her if she had talked to any astronauts yet about the overview effect and just that emotional, moment you have when you see the planet against the blackness of space that you both have talked to me about. I'll kick this to you, Nicole, and then Charlie. Nicole, what advice do you have for Haley about what to expect mentally for that?
I think, and I've actually had the chance to speak to her a little bit. We haven't spoken about that yet.
Okay.
But I'll tell you, I can't wait for the conversation. But what I would say, it's like I would say to everybody is, I think back on my own experience where I really had high expectations of what this was going to be like. I had spoken to my colleague astronauts who had flown and experienced this. I'd looked at all the pictures and videos. And in hindsight, when I think about it, what I kind of assessed it as, what I thought it was going to be, was probably about here. And what it was like way out here. And it's just, I think, this overwhelming, almost can't describe it, glow and translucence. And yet bigger than just the beauty of it is this reality check of, oh my gosh, I live on a planet. I don't really, hadn't up to that point really remembered actively thinking about that in my day-to-day life. And that's in all of that beauty that I saw, that glowingness against that blackest black. It was like, wow, I live on a planet. We're all Earthlings. Only border that matters is that thin blue line of atmosphere. And how do I just keep that with me for the rest of my life and share that? Because, that to me was those 3 simple lessons all wrapped up were what came from that. And that I think is so important to share. And I don't know if your brain's ready to process that right away through the beauty. And you see that beauty and you realize, man, I want to go back to Earth and make the way we live on this planet as beautiful as it is. And I saw it from space. So I think we're all motivated that way afterwards too, which I'm hopeful for all of these people, whether they're there a day or they're there weeks or months. I'm hopeful that they come back with that call to action as well.
Charlie, I'll give you the last word. What advice do you want to give to, future space tourists or the next generation of astronauts that may be watching today? What advice do you have for them?
I'm a simple person. Same piece of advice I give to everybody, no matter what their age, is study really hard, work incredibly hard to become the best in your class or in your group or whatever. And then the final thing is, don't ever be afraid of failure. Don't let anybody tell you that you can't do something. Don't be like Charlie Bolden before he met Ron McNair.
Well, thank you both. We've been speaking with Charlie Bolden. He's a former NASA administrator and astronaut, and also Nicole Stott, a former NASA astronaut and the founder of the Space for Art Foundation. Thank you both for this conversation this evening.
It's been great. Thanks very much.
Thanks, Brendan.
And I'd like to thank the Orlando Science Center for sponsoring the event tonight. They're featuring the Planet Planet Pioneers exhibit now through May 9th, all about what it takes to survive on another planet. Now, there were a few questions about traveling to Mars, so maybe that'd be a good place to start there. At WMFE, I'd like to thank my editor, Matthew Petty, our president and CEO, Erica Pulley-Hayes, our director of development and marketing, Christine Hetzel, our digital manager, Ryan Ellison, and our director of content, Steve Yasko. And thanks to you, Are We There Yet is produced in part by our listeners. You can help fuel our exploration with a donation at WMFE.org or calling 1-800-785-2020. And I want to thank our listeners for the opportunity to talk space with you these past 5 years. It truly is a dream come true. I wanted to be an astronaut. I was terrible at math, so this is the next best thing for me. So, so with that, I'd say be sure to subscribe to the podcast to hear more of these conversations. Charlie and Nicole are always welcome guests. Join us every Tuesday night at 6:30 here on WMFE, America's Space Station, or subscribe wherever you get your podcasts. And until next time, I'm Brendan Byrne. Thank you for listening. And Nicole and Charlie, thank you so much for your conversation.
You're welcome.
Farewell. Stay safe.
Thank you.